Well, welcome, happy warriors, to the Rabbi Daniel Lapin Show, where I, your rabbi, reveal how the world really works. Thank you for being part of the show. Thank you for your spreading the word on the show. And listen, if you haven't yet subscribed, you would be helping the show by making sure you do that already right now. So please go ahead, because I want to launch into the question of why the rich and famous flame out. In specifics, I actually want to look at a very nice guy called Tucker Carlson. By all accounts, a friendly, charming guy. He is a very successful host, and I've never met him, but we have friends in common, and people speak very warmly about him, and he certainly seems a likable guy. But at the same time, over the last little while, he has adopted some extremely peculiar friends, and he is advocating some weird positions. And so I've been very curious, how can somebody of Tucker Carlson's prominence adopt a charlatan like a guy called Darryl Cooper and have him lauded by Tucker lauds him as a great popular historian and so on. It's pretty wacky stuff, because this Darryl Cooper went on Tucker's show and spoke about essentially a reevaluation of World War II, where Hitler's the good guy and Churchill is the bad guy, and et cetera, et cetera. The Holocaust, the killing of however many Jews were killed, was essentially a German administrative error. So, look, this is bizarre stuff, and there've been other things as well, and so that launched me on a search into ancient Jewish wisdom for anything that would provide an explanation for what is going on there. And then I realized, it's not just Tucker Carlson. There are a lot of people who have exercised astonishingly bad judgment, in many cases to their own very serious detriment. And so, I think of Elizabeth Holmes and her firm Theranos. Well, she's currently serving time in jail. I think of politicians. Do you remember Rod Blagojevich from Illinois? Also went to jail for incredibly bad judgment. Do you remember the governor of New York, Eliot Spitzer, who lost his marriage and family, lost his career, because he decided to entrust his entire life to a 19-year-old call girl, part of a brothel system operating out of Washington, D.C. How does a guy who reaches the highest pinnacles of political success, governor of New York, just being spoken of as a presidential candidate, and exercises appallingly bad judgment? And how about you and me? Is there a danger of us also exercising bad judgment to the extent of being ultimately self-destructive? What makes people do that? And if we can understand that, is it possible for us to find a way to safeguard ourselves from this kind of thing? And so all of that is the topic of today's show. And what we're also going to do is, I want to let you know, this coming Tuesday, June the 24th, I am doing a special webinar. It's called a Wealth Building Masterclass. And it's going to be 90 minutes. There's going to be 15 minutes of Q&A where I'll be able to answer your questions specifically. And wisdom in the age of AI, how to build wealth when the rules are changing. So what I plan doing is guiding you through timeless, Bible-based financial principles that still work. Perhaps instead of saying that still work, I should probably say that work more than ever right now, even though we live in a rapidly changing, artificial intelligence present world. So we're not going to have hundreds and hundreds of people on. There are only a few seats left, and the reason is only because, there's no technical limitation. Our systems will allow us to have many people on, but we want to make it as interactive as possible. We want each person to be able to speak and ask if they want to do that. So go ahead and go to wehappywarriors.com. Okay, that's the name of our website, wehappywarriors.com, and you'll see Wealth Building Masterclass right there on the top of the page. Click on that. You'll be able to get more information. It's Tuesday night, June 24th, so it's coming right up, and it is going to be a special program for our current times, for anybody who is engaged in business, whether you're an employee, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a business owner, whether you do business with various companies, and you want to get a sense of how well placed are the people you associate with, how well placed are they to cope with the new environment. And yes, it is a new environment, and there have been a number of times like this in our history. The early 20th century with the popularization of the automobile, where all of a sudden cars were reachable and everyone had a car. That was a huge change in America. The arrival of television, huge change. Television penetrated American homes more rapidly than any other invention to date at that point, including the telephone. So it was really pretty astonishing. And so right now we're looking at a similarly influential change in society, and I think it's important that we all understand it. And I have spent the time researching it, making sure that I understand it, and making sure that I integrate all the information out there along with the timeless truths of the Bible and ancient Jewish wisdom, so that I can present you a comprehensive package that is designed to give you full understanding of exactly what we're going through. And so that's at wehappywarriors.com, W-E, right? wehappywarriors.com, and you just click on Wealth Building Masterclass. So on we go to try and understand Tucker Carlson and what exactly is really going on there. But it wasn't just Tucker Carlson, as you know. I mentioned the Democratic governor of Illinois for 6 years. And before that, he was a member of Congress, and he was this was a guy with solid political credentials. He was a Democrat, and in late 2008, he was arrested for corrupt. What was he doing? Turned out he was taking money from people for an appointment to fill the Senate seat that was vacated by Barack Obama. Barack Obama, you'll remember, was a senator from Illinois, and then amazingly quickly, Barack Obama becomes president, and now it was up to the governor of Illinois to replace that Senate seat, and he he basically sold it. Chris Christie, a New Jersey politician, rising star in national politics. He was being considered as a vice president with George W. Bush, and he was really doing very well. And what did it turn out to be? He wanted to punish the mayor of Fort Lee, New Jersey, and he made a really bad decision. He ordered lane closures on the George Washington Bridge. Now, I don't know if you have ever had the experience of having to drive from, shall we say, Fort Lee or Teaneck or Paterson, New Jersey, across the George Washington Bridge into Manhattan. But let me tell you, on the very best of days, it's an ordeal. You try, go in lunchtime on Sunday. You're not going to have a quick, easy drive across the Hudson River. At the best of times, it's an expensive ordeal. And so Christie exhibits appallingly bad judgment, because how could it not come out that he tried to punish the mayor and the people of Fort Lee by essentially closing lanes on the bridge, and it made the situation completely to be stuck in the traffic on the entry to the George Washington Bridge. If you hear horror in my voice, it's because I've been there. I've done that. Should we mention Bill Clinton as well? Okay, I understand the guy has a healthy libido and a almost uncontrollable appetites on a number of different levels. But okay, a young intern in the White House. Is there any more watched zone in the whole world? Is there any more guarded? Is there any more secure zone than the White House? And he goes and he disgraces himself by an obsession with a young intern, Monica Lewinsky. And so it goes. Do you remember John Edwards? John Edwards was a Democratic senator in North Carolina. So when John Kerry ran for president in 2004, he took John Edwards as his vice president. And what happens with him? Turns out that while this is going on, while he's engaged in the race in 2004 and then again in 2008, turns out a big National Enquirer reveal that he was in an affair with a campaign staffer. Do you remember her name? Rielle Hunter. I do. And she gave birth to a kid. And Edwards for a long time denied it was his kid, and she insisted on a paternity test. And okay, you haven't heard much of John Edwards lately, have you? Guy really had a career going for himself, and ruins it with just a terribly bad judgment. Jocelyn Elders, do you remember her? She was Bill Clinton's Surgeon General of the United States, first African American in that position, and she only served a year. And what happened? She decides that it's a really good idea to push and to promote self. What would be the word? All right, just masturbation, and this would be a good thing for people to do. Yeah, of course she had to quit. She was forced to resign her job, obviously. Do you remember Mark Foley, Republican congressman from Florida? Again, denied it, but it turned out he was forced to admit that he had inappropriate conduct with pages in the Capitol. Barney Frank, a Massachusetts Democrat, House of Representatives. And then it turns out, okay, Barney Frank was homosexual, and he hired a male prostitute on a regular basis, and then invited the guy to live in his house. And it's just weird, and it was, again, just a public disgrace. And just lots of people like that. What can you do? Do you remember David Patterson? There's another one. He was Elliot Spitzer. Talking of Elliot Spitzer, he was his right-hand man. David Patterson was the lieutenant governor of New York. He became governor when Spitzer resigned, and then he was forced to disclose extramarital affairs, him and his wife, and it's very, very strange. Then turned out there was some corruption. He was involved with public government bids and contracts. Again, bad judgment. Anthony Weiner, talk of politicians, my goodness. Rising star, right? Rising star. And I mean, at this stage, probably everybody knows the name Anthony Weiner is now a joke in politics. He ran for mayor of New York afterwards, and again sending. Look, it's repugnant. But the real question is to try and understand what is it with these people. Bernie Madoff. All right, what's there to say there? I mean, smart guy, built and really did have a successful fund until he converted it into a Ponzi scheme. And again, destroyed his life, destroyed his wife's life, destroyed his son's lives. It was a disaster, and the lives of thousands of people who invested a huge amount of money with him. Elizabeth Holmes. I mentioned her, but you know who's another example? Sam Bankman-Fried. A cryptocurrency billionaire. And he started FTX was his company. And again, bad judgment. Just really, really awful things. Do you remember WeWork? WeWork was a brilliant idea of buying buildings, office buildings, and converting them into short-term rentable spaces. Great idea. The creator of it, a young man, Adam Neumann, Neumann, Neumann. And what happens with Adam Neumann? Well, he's a rising star, and before you know where you are, he's got corporate jets, and he's engaging in public use of drugs. And eventually, the investors and the board of directors of WeWork kicked him out, and he was gone. His life was over, although not really, because he's starting up something else I saw recently. But at any rate, why do something so reckless and self-destructive? Why exhibit such appalling judgment? There was a head of Hewlett-Packard, Mark Hurd, also falsified financial records, expense records, to conceal a relationship, an improper relationship he had. Do you remember Gary Hart? That's another interesting one. He was a frontrunner for the 1988 Democratic presidential nomination, and he challenged the press. He said, "I've got nothing to hide. You can watch me all the time." Well, they did. And they found he was engaged in an affair with Donna Rice, who, by the way, has turned her life around, and she's been doing important stuff. But a photo of Gary Hart and Donna Rice on a yacht, whose name you might remember. I remember the name of the boat, Monkey Business. Anyway, he had to withdraw from the race. The governor of South Carolina, remember Mark Sanford? He disappeared for a week. He told his staff he was hiking the Appalachian Trail. And they searched for him. They tried to find him. Turned out he was out of the country. He was having an affair with a woman in Argentina. The General Assembly of South Carolina censured him, and he had to quit. And so it goes. Right? There's no shortage. Do you remember the Enron scandal? That was about 2001. Kenneth Lay. And again, you're talking about people who, they were not stupid people. Kenneth Lay, not irresponsible little kids. These were not teenagers. And I mean, the man built up Enron, and he was involved, it turns out, in a big accounting fraud, cost billions of dollars. Bernie Ebbers, also going back to that period, there was a company called WorldCom, one of the early internet companies. And he bankrupted the company, made a mess of his life and of the lives of many, many other people. Tyco, another huge financial company of that period. Dennis Kozlowski, flagrant misusing of corporate funds, and ended his career, damaged his life, had to get divorced. Big mess. And so I'm not suggesting that Tucker Carlson is anywhere in that region, right? Obviously, he's not. But I found and realized that there are very important similarities. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, I think what it means is that Tucker, along with all the people I mentioned, experienced meteoric rises, very quick rises to very great heights. All of these people, Elizabeth Holmes, to take an example, student at Stanford, and literally in a matter of less than a year, look what happens. Huge sums of money are shoveled at her beyond belief, not millions, billions. So she was a teenager still, young woman at Stanford. She was a college student, starts Theranos, the blood testing company, and the rise was meteoric. Elliot Spitzer's political rise, also meteoric. And everybody I've been speaking about, Adam Neumann of WeWork, he immigrated to this country from Israel, and again in a short space of time, he was soaring in the clouds. Sam Bankman-Fried, all of them, the rise to enormous heights very quickly is the common feature of all these people. And I decided not to include show business celebrities because there's just too many of them there. And it's sort of, what's the big surprise, right? But the reality is that all of these people are part of a common pattern of very rapid rise. So how do you know? If your business ventures succeed beyond your dreams, and before you know it, you are riding high, how do you know you're not going to be somebody who makes a dreadful, bad judgment call and destroy everything you've built up? How do you know you're not going to do that? And that's what I thought would be the most valuable part of today's show. In order to explain that, I have to first of all explain this. Something that if you've been a regular listener, if you've been a happy warrior, if you have listened to some of the programs and resources that you'll find at rabbidaniellapin.com, if you've been a coaching client of mine, you will know that an accurate understanding of how the world really works depends on understanding that there is a spiritual reality parallel to the physical reality that everybody knows. The spiritual reality, it's not that hard to understand and relate to and get to know, but it's important to do so. And so from its very origin, in the very beginning, the first verse of the Bible, the first verse of Genesis is, "In the beginning, God created heaven and earth." And ancient Jewish wisdom asks the question, well, why didn't it just say God created everything, or God created the whole universe? Why this distillation into heaven and earth? Whereas earth, is okay, it's the earth. We know what it is. But what's the heaven? Like, is there a place called the heaven? So what does that mean exactly? And why does it say heaven and earth, not everything or the universe? And the answer is that heaven represents the spiritual world and earth represents the material, physical world. And number one to understand, the very first thing that's got to be laid out for anybody right up front is that we live in a world of a spiritual reality and a physical reality. And once one understands that, then a lot of things fall into place. Are people the same as animals? Well, evolutionary biology would suggest yes, but again, the answer is much clearer to understand once you know the difference between spiritual and physical reality. And so it's perfectly possible to say that there are strong physical similarities between a man and a chimpanzee, and there are, but there are no spiritual realities. And the distinction between a man and a chimpanzee is fundamentally spiritual. Men and women, same thing, right? Just some elementary plumbing distinctions, but other than that, men and women are exactly the same. Well, you're right. From a physical perspective, there's not that huge amount of difference. From a spiritual perspective, it couldn't be a deeper or wider canyon. There's a huge difference. So as soon as one understands that, even in the area of economics, one of the reasons that economics is a dismal science is because it involves people. And as soon as you involve people, you're involving spiritual beings and physical beings, because people are not just bodies. If we were, we'd be as easy to deal with as animals. You can train animals, you can predict animal behavior, but you can't do that with your employees, because they're human beings and they have bodies and souls. And that changes everything. And just think about it, many of the financial decisions you make in your day-to-day life, many of them are made not for physical reasons, but for spiritual reasons. When you buy an expensive suit of clothing, you could have bought for a fraction of the sum a set of overalls or a pair of jeans and a T-shirt. But why did you not do that? Will the expensive clothing protect you from the weather better? No. Will it last longer? Probably not. Is it more in any way superior? No. If you were buying clothing on a purely materialistic basis, you would go ahead and buy something, $15 outfit. But we're doing much more with clothing. We're doing much more than protecting ourselves physically. We are also nurturing our souls. And so there is our dignity to contemplate. Dignity is a spiritual, it's part of our soul, not part of our body. There is our image, there is our identity. Ditto, ditto. Again, we're talking soul, not body. So at any rate, understanding that means we can now move on to the next axiom in this discussion, and that is that in the same way that there is such a thing as being superb physically, physical excellence, there is also such a thing as being superb spiritually, having spiritual excellence. What is physical excellence? Well, simple, right? It might be beauty, it might be looks, it might be strength, it might be endurance, depending what you happen to be measuring for. If you're dealing with an Olympic high jumper or an Olympic cyclist, you know what you're looking for. But it's easy to tell that that person is superb physically in comparison to the overwhelming majority of people. Look at a beautiful woman or a very good-looking man, and you realize, look, they are physically a step up from most other people. That's all it is. All right, fine. It's pretty clear. If I say physical excellence, superb physical condition, physical greatness, you got it. But what do I mean when I say spiritual excellence? He is in superb spiritual condition. She is great spiritually. What are we talking about? And I almost want to, give you 10 minutes to take a piece of paper or a notebook and a pen and start trying to answer that question. But we don't have that time, unfortunately. And so if you want to pause the podcast and think about it a little bit, well, you can do that. But otherwise, we will continue. Spiritual greatness, number one, is things that are not out of your control. On the contrary, they are things you can improve on. Okay, so certain aspects of physical greatness are biological. You inherited the genes for great looks, or you inherited the genes for great strength, whatever it is. But a lot of physical greatness is physical, meaning that, not much you could have done about it. You needed to start off with the genes. However, spiritually, there is no such limitation. And so I don't beat myself up for not being a great linebacker on my neighborhood synagogue football team. I don't beat myself up for that because I didn't inherit the builds. I simply didn't inherit the genes. It wouldn't be a good idea for me to try and seek a career in the NFL. Wouldn't be. But when it comes to spiritual greatness, every attribute of spiritual greatness is something for which you don't need anyone else and you can't blame anybody else. It's not your parents, it's not your culture, it's not your skin color, it's nothing. Spiritual greatness is attainable by you and by me and by every single other person in the world. So what is spiritual greatness? Well, let me first of all just tell you one thing that it absolutely is not. It is not IQ, because overwhelmingly your intelligence is largely inherited to a great extent, not 100%, but a lot of it is. So spiritual greatness has nothing to do with inherited intelligence. All right, so now let's look at some of the things that spiritual greatness is. It is self-disciplined. Now, can anybody develop self-discipline? Yes, you can. And I teach that. But right now, I'm just going with the facts. And so becoming a self-disciplined person doesn't happen overnight, by the way. But it is a part of achieving genuine greatness. And when I say genuine greatness, I mean spiritual greatness, because physical greatness is a very specific area. It's physically great. It's identifiable. It is what it is. There's not much a very beautiful woman has to do. She just is a very beautiful woman. But there is no person who has very strong self-discipline who just has it. That person worked on it. That man or that woman really struggled to build self-discipline, to be able to overcome procrastination. Well, that's part of having self-discipline. To not be self-indulgent, to not feel that you have to satisfy the call of your appetites. I feel like some luxury. I feel like pleasure, sensual. I feel like more and more and more food of more exotic kinds. A truly great person, a person with genuine spiritual greatness, may not necessarily be an ascetic. It's not necessarily somebody who has to reject all forms of physical pleasure. Not at all. But it's under control. It's with restraint. It's in balance. Another one, total anger control. That is part of greatness. Total anger control. Look, it is childish and primitive to let fly in a temper tantrum when somebody irritates you. It's what toddlers do. But a great person works to overcome it. Not easy. Not easy to make sure you not only don't articulate anger, you don't express yourself in outbursts of indignation and fury, but that you get to a point where you don't even feel anger. You may be very opposed to something. You may be unhappy that something is happening, but anger is not part of your makeup. You will know that you've achieved greatness when you can control your anger completely and entirely. Humility, hard one. Humility doesn't mean persuading yourself that you're nobody and that you're nothing. No, not at all. Humility acknowledges that you are a human being that you have trained yourself in self-discipline, you've trained yourself in anger control, you have been able to avoid procrastination, and you've trained yourself to do what you should do when you should do it. You're not nobody. You can't now say, but I'm such a humble person that I'm nobody. No. What you have to recognize is that you're a somebody. You are a creation of God, and it is to God that the glory goes, not to you. And this is really, really important. I will tell you that I don't doubt that there is a way to do it if you are a secular person. And by the way, if you are such a person and you've managed to acquire humility, I would love for you to make sure you're a happy warrior and go onto the We Happy Warrior website and let me know how you've done it. I don't know what the tool is for a secular person to achieve humility. As a religious person to achieve humility, it's much easier because you've got God in your corner. And so it's really easy. For instance, imagine nobody really builds a great business by himself, but just imagine for a moment the preposterous proposition that somebody builds a business by himself. And then there's somebody else who also built a big successful business, but with a wonderful team. Which man is more easily able to express humility? The first guy's got to basically say, you know what, it wasn't me, it was just luck. I happened to be at the right place at the right time. Maybe it's true, but that's all he can fall back on. The second guy can say, you may be honoring me for my business success, but you know as well as I know that I can point out 25 people in my organization without whom this wouldn't have happened. And so I'm privileged to be part of the team, but I assure you it isn't just me. It's not even mostly me. That is a huge help in trying to achieve humility. Humility is really, really, really necessary, as is self-discipline, as is an independence of self-indulgence and anger control. These are all important things. There are a few others, but I'm just going to do one more because you get the idea. The other one, the last one I'm going to do is intellectual development. Are you somebody who spends all your leisure time watching sports or watching entertainment? Or do you read? In other words, are you a passive, agency-less entity that just has other people beaming content onto your eyeballs? Or are you a person with strong cognitive intention, or intentionality would be a better way to put it? Are you a person for whom learning things and understanding things and gaining knowledge and wisdom is important? Some people are and some people aren't. Spiritual greatness requires you to grow spiritually. This is quite independent of going to the gym and working out physically, but working out spiritually is just as important. And you do that with reading books, you do that with talking with wise people, you do that with finding real teachers. You won't find them in your local college or university, most likely not, but you seek out real teachers. That is all part of it. And so if you are as intent on achieving spiritual greatness as you are physical greatness, maybe more intentional, then you want to make sure you develop humility in yourself. You want to focus on intellectual development, cognitive growth. You want to work on self-discipline. You want to become less dependent on pleasure and comfort and luxury, laziness, and you want to be able to control anger. And when you've done that, you can pretty much count on yourself to act wisely and to advise others wisely. Without them, my friends, the biggest threat, which is sudden high elevation of prominence, prestige, and prosperity, can sink you, because it will cause you to have bad judgment. And that is the explanation for not only Tucker Carlson, but for vast numbers of other people. People who achieved richness and fame quickly are usually the ones who flame out most spectacularly. Because if you are not spiritually great and you achieve great wealth and great fame, suddenly it'll take you down. It'll make you feel proud. It'll make you, if you haven't trained yourself in humility, forget about it. You will begin to think you're invulnerable. And there's no doubt about it that Eliot Spitzer, governor of New York, who used public documents, in other words, there was no concealing the money he was spending on his escorts and prostitutes. No attempt to hide it even. He was so sure of himself and so arrogant that it never even occurred to him to go cautiously and carefully with when he became client number 9, was it, at the Mayflower Hotel in D.C. Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, a great sense of invulnerability. Look what I've done. From nowhere, I was a student at Yale University, and in no time at all, I'm governor of Arkansas, and in no time at all, I'm president of the United States. Of course he felt invulnerable, because he didn't have the spiritual strength. He didn't have the spiritual greatness to match what was happening to him in the world. I always mention Churchill because I know a lot about him and his I'm very aware of him as a figure of 20th century history. But how come he didn't? He was praised by millions. Wherever he went, he was looked up to. How come he didn't flame out? How come he didn't have bad judgment? Because he had spiritual greatness. He absolutely did. And there are many other people like that. I must tell you that in the area of spiritual greatness among presidents, Lyndon Johnson didn't have it. John Kennedy, not even close to it. He was self-indulgent. He considered very, very little humility. And so, he did the things he did. I'll tell you who may have, going back a long time, Abraham Lincoln, probably spiritually great. I think Ronald Reagan, and again, this isn't digital. It's not yes or no. There are varying degrees. But I think Ronald Reagan definitely moved into the scale on the side of spiritual greatness, not being a spiritual midget like Barack Obama, for instance, who, again, rose too quickly. And his best friends acknowledge that Barack Obama has an arrogance problem and that he has an anger problem. All the things that you need for spiritual greatness, he didn't have. I know you're going to want to know what I think about Donald Trump, and the answer is I simply do not know. I don't even want to say the jury is still out because I'm not sure one will ever know. But it's hard to say. It's really, really hard to say. So I'm going to think about that some more and try and understand it. But at the moment, I am not able to say that President Trump has no spiritual greatness. And I also am not able to say that, yes, he does. So I don't know. But there it is, folks. That's how it works. So, happily, Tucker Carlson has not sunk. He's not disgraced himself. He's not, and may he not do so. I hope he won't. But bad judgment happens easily, and it can happen to anybody who doesn't have the requisite spiritual greatness and who experiences the kind of meteoric rise that Tucker Carlson enjoyed in his career. To get from where he started to where he is now, or even to get from when he was a Fox News host to the point where he is now, it happened very quickly. And it brought him a lot of money and a lot of prominence and a lot of prestige. And I'm going to say, nice a guy as he is, he's simply, and many nice people don't have spiritual greatness. But not having spiritual greatness and experiencing a sudden dramatic elevation, a meteoric rise, the likelihood is very strong that you will make a monumental blunder, that you will exhibit appallingly bad judgment at some point or another. And so for that and many other reasons, there is great value in not only exercising and working out and losing weight and trying to run, but there is just as much, if not more, value in trying to achieve real spiritual greatness. Apart from anything else, it makes for a far more successful life. So until next week, my dear happy warriors, this is your Rabbi wishing you a week of beautiful growth in your family and your finances and your friendships and your fitness. But let's not leave out the fifth one, your faith, because the area of achieving spiritual greatness comes under the F of faith. I'm Rabbi Daniel Lapin. God bless.